Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. I wanted to talk a little bit about autism differences or disabilities, or are they the same? It would be best to start out with the 1990s neurodiversity movement. So when this came out, it was kind of a relatively new concept about how autism isn't necessarily a disability. It's certainly not an illness, but it's more of a difference, a brain difference. Kind of like some people have brown eyes, some people have blue eyes. And that's kind of the way they wanted to paint it. Now, there's pros and cons to this movement. Some of the pros would be, instead of seeing someone with autism as disabled, not fit for society, you just see them as acting differently. Like maybe they do little hand flaps or things like that. Maybe they don't have very good eye contact and they're doing this. Would you call that a disability? Well, in my opinion, it's not necessarily a disability. It's just different. It's different behavior. So that can be a little bit confusing to some because other people see people in wheelchairs biting themselves with chew toys and things like that. Now, isn't that autism? Well, again, this always goes back to autism as a spectrum, and I think that's what's confusing for a lot of people. So yeah, some of the cons of the neurodiversity movement would be overlooking those who have actual disabilities in the autism community. So what would some of those disabilities be? Well, I think for one, self-injury. So people who constantly hit themselves. Some autistic people hit themselves so hard they turn black and blue, they bleed, they have to wear helmets. Some have to wear almost like straitjackets, like protective restraints. There's obviously a lot of other hosts of things. Some people have gastrointestinal problems. And calling something a disability, this is the thing. We live in a society that is so politically correct that everyone's just kind of walking on eggshells, like we don't want to say the wrong thing, we don't want to do the wrong thing, and it just has the net effect of not addressing real issues. And disability might be a dirty word to some, but to us it just means you are disabled, you cannot do something, or you cannot do something very well. So Ian, for example, we asked him before this video, like, what are some things that are hard for you? Do you want to share some things that are hard for you because of your autism, or?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
There's some things, like I used to hit myself.
Used to hit yourself?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? What about school? Are some things hard at school?
Like Kyler makes fun of me at some stuff, like the urinal and...
Well, not making fun of you. I mean, like, it is some homework hard or some subjects.
Social.
Yeah, or social. My wife's pointing out social aspects. Is it hard to talk to people sometimes?
I guess so.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah.
So an example would be, and I get that everyone has quirks, or sometimes we put our foot in our mouths. Everybody has that experience where they're like, man, I wish I could recall what I just said. I didn't think very well before I spoke out loud. But with Ian, it almost reaches level of disability. And obviously people who can't talk with autism, I would say that's a disability. Yes, they can use sign language and other various forms of communication, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they wouldn't want to talk. And Ian, for a long time, had, and still does to some extent, I would say, some verbal issues where he has a disability when it comes to speech. He can't form his thoughts very clearly. There's a lot of mumbling. There's a lot of repetition. A lot of times he gets stuck on certain subjects and just won't let them go. So when he's talking to people, he talks about something he's interested only, exclusively, for like 10 or 15 minutes without including the other person in the conversation. And again, I know sometimes it transitions between difference and disability back and forth, and it's kind of a gray, fuzzy area there. I understand that. But I'm just trying to point out that Ian, our son who has had the most severe case of autism, has had some disabilities associated with his autism, whereas someone like Connor, our middle son, I would say his are mainly differences. And he's very aware of his autism to the point where he tries to pass, which means he tries to fit in, for lack of a better term, with neurotypical people around him. So yeah, there's that wide spectrum. We refer to the autism spectrum, if you're not familiar with that yet, if you're new to the autism community, where there's so many different forms of autism that trying to say all autism is this or all autism is that can be very hurtful in a way that you're not addressing people's real issues. So for example, some people have said to us, to our sons, like, oh, your kids don't have autism because they can talk. as if people with autism exclusively are nonverbal. Or some people who say like, oh, that's just a disabled person, they have a mental handicap, they don't have autism. So it works both ways. So yeah, I also want to address that what might be a disability to some might just be a difference to others depending on the severity. Some people have crippling anxiety. That happens with a lot of people in the autism community. They have severe anxiety, and that's certainly been manifested in Ian before, where out of the blue, he'll just get worried about something that's not relevant, that wasn't brought up. Like he'll say like, Dad, I don't want to go to jail, based on a conversation a long time ago where we said, hey, if you keep hitting your brothers or keep doing things like this, when you become an adult and you hit people, that will land you in jail. And we weren't trying to use fear tactics against our son. We were just trying to help him realize this is why you can't hit people, because when you're an adult, people look at things a lot differently when you're older. And out of the blue, like days or weeks later, he's just like, Dad, I'm afraid of going to prison. I don't want to go to jail and everything. And I'm like, oh, Ian, I by no means that I want you to worry about that to that extent. I just wanted to make it clear that you can't do certain things when you're an adult. So we're trying to teach you young not to do those things. And it became very hard. You had like a meltdown for a good couple hours, right?
I don't want to go to jail.
I know. And you're not going to jail. We're doing everything in our power to prevent that from happening.
That's the bad thing about jail. Like, you eat disgusting food instead of healthy, right?
Yes, disgusting food at jail, yes.
Why do you only eat disgusting food instead of healthy?
Because taxpayers don't want to pay for good food for inmates. So, that's an example. Boy, I mean, we could talk about a host of other issues of disabilities versus differences. I think in most cases of autism, it seems like, especially with high functioning, we talk about high functioning versus low functioning. Most cases of high functioning could be labeled as differences because they simply aren't getting in the way of the person's day-to-day life unless someone's like bullying them. They just go about as if it's normal to them. So maybe they like rock back and forth and, flap their hands. I wouldn't necessarily say that's a disability unless it's really bad. So life goes on. Whereas, if someone needs their diapers changed, and I'm not trying to be rude, I'm just saying if it's so severe that someone has to help them to perform bodily functions, I would say that's a disability because they cannot do that for themselves. So yeah, and in between those two extremes is a wide range of things that happen. Now, the reason I did this video, that we're making this video, is because there seems to be this huge rift in the autism community. I was looking at some articles on it, and a lot of people are in disagreement over, is autism a difference or is it a disability? And there's some people who have severe cases of autism in their kids or siblings or family members, and they're really angry at the difference movement because the difference movement makes it sound like, oh, you're overplaying your hand at autism. You're making it sound like autism is so difficult, it's a disability, when it's not. It's just a little difference. It's not a big deal. And so these people who have severe cases of autism are getting angry and upset because they're like, no, we have real needs. We have real issues that need to be addressed. So when you call it a difference, you're downplaying all of the help that is needed with those who have disabilities. On the other hand, you have those with high functioning autism and stuff like that who they don't want their kids to be labeled disabled because it might become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Others might look down on their kids. They might feel like, oh, you're just using your kids' autism as an excuse for bad behavior, so on and so forth. So I don't think there needs to be that rift in the autism community. I think people can just understand that there are many, many forms of autism, and under that umbrella, you could find differences, disabilities, everything in between. And I'd also like to add that you can find, how would I word this? Disability abilities or heightened abilities? What would you say, Britt? They're enabled, extra enabled?
There are things that people on the spectrum are uniquely strong in as compared to neurotypical people, like strength of focus. You've heard of savants where people are uniquely talented in one thing, like maybe Adam, the movie Adam, about the autistic guy who was really into space.
Right.
It's a great example.
So Brittany, the omnipotent voice behind the camera.
That's right.
So yeah, that's a great example, and it's not all cases of autism. Again, case by case basis, but there are many people in the autism community who do have special abilities beyond what neurotypical people might have. So for instance, Connor, our middle son, he struggles with math to the point where he destroys his homework. He has a really, really hard time with that. I would say even to the point of maybe like a disability for now. But his reading is excellent. In fact, he's a grade ahead of his fellow students. So sometimes things balance out in the mix when it comes to autism. Again, differences. So some things are better, some things are worse, and vice versa. But I think in most cases, especially in severe autism, a lot of people would be upset if you didn't address their real disabilities.
So I used to be a CNA, a nursing assistant, and one thing
They might not be able to see you.
Oh,
You have to get down to our level here.
So one thing when I was a CNA or nursing assistant that we talked a lot about was ADLs, or activities of daily life. How well can your patient do them? And I think that's relevant here because we're talking about disability versus ability. And I think a big measuring stick would be how well can these people on the spectrum accomplish the activities of daily living? Can they hold a job? Can they wash and bathe themselves without being prompted? Can they do all these basic things for necessary function in normal life without being helped or prompted or taught? The biggest thing I've noticed as a mom of 3 kids on the spectrum is that it takes a lot of patience just to do the very basic things. Go brush your teeth. Go clean yourself up on the toilet. You need to wash your hair. You smell. Make sure you eat breakfast because you forgot, because you're focusing so hard on your fun STEM thing, And I think when we talk about ability and disability, these are the things we have to focus on because these are the things people need help with the most. When they're mentally handicapped in the sense that they need help to remember to put on their shoes before they go outside, or their coats. This is not just a forgetful kid thing. This is an actual, I'm off in my own little world. I'm focusing on tolerating all this input and sensory stimulus that I can't, remember.
You need to lean down. I hope you're not just seeing her mouth. But yes,
Anyway,
all very
that's
good
my
valid
blur.
points.
Yeah,
No,
that's
all
my
very good
thought.
valid points. And going along with that, because Brittany was a CNA and she saw disabled people in that capacity, and a lot of that translates into our home life. But going along with that, I would like to say too, we've turned disability into a dirty word, and it doesn't need to be. So, for example, I have bad vision. Now, I could say it's not a disability; it's a difference. Sure, yeah, it's a difference.
Differently abled.
Yeah, differently abled. And I could just say it's a difference and not address the issue. What would happen? I'd be a bad driver because I just see a bunch of blurry objects passing by me. I'd also be a terrible reader at distance. A host of other issues related to poor vision. Or I could fix the issue or try to do my best as possible in addressing poor vision. So contact lenses, corrective surgery, glasses. And I don't think anyone would take offense at that. Like, oh, you have bad vision. You have disabled vision. I'm offended. No. You just say, oh, you got bad vision. Why don't you take care of it? Okay, I'll go take care of it. Big deal, right? Another issue, we have a family member who has really bad seizures without medication. Disability. Yes, it's also a difference. We could call anything a difference. But without that seizure medication, without getting the help that person needs, they expose themselves to a host of problems, like passing out in traffic, biting their tongue. This individual has bit through their tongue and caused blood to come from their mouth. I saw it firsthand. A lot of other issues with epilepsy and seizures and things like that. So, yeah, just in closing, my hope with this video is that in the autism community, we're not going to turn disability into a dirty word or be so hyper politically correct that we have to say certain words only. I get not saying things like that person is mentally retarded because that's actually a misdiagnosis. But throwing the baby out with the bathwater is not a good alternative, if that makes sense. So, we hope you found this video informative and helpful, and to understand that, yeah, disability difference, it's just a case-by-case basis, and it's not a big deal. It doesn't have to be a fight. We can talk through this. Why does everything have to be a fight in our world? It doesn't have to be. Okay.
And please subscribe, and thanks for subscribing.
Well, that's very nice. Is there anything else you want to say? You want to say thanks to everybody?
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks.